I'm Professor Rich and this is TYT History. But today I'm not going to talk about history. This is the second in a couple of videos that I'm doing here on how to talk about economics like a progressive. Now, conservatives have constructed this religion of free markets. The government has to stay out of markets at all costs. But that's not good economics. Now, and I want to explain to you how, the next time somebody comes and tells you this, how to talk back to them. And I want to talk today about, last time I talked about competitive markets, why they're a good thing, and why the idea that they should be left alone doesn't necessarily equal competitive markets. In fact, sometimes it creates massive inefficiencies in the market. Today I want to talk about externalities and perverse incentives. Let's start with externalities. An externality is an economics word for any result of an economic transaction that is not paid for by the buyer and the seller in the process of the transaction. So, for example, if you build a dam, electric company builds a dam. They built the dam for electricity, and they harness the electricity and they sell it to you, the consumer. But that's not the only byproduct of the dam, right? The dam creates all sorts of other things. For example, dams create flood control. That's a good thing, but you didn't pay for it in your economic transaction for the electricity. The dam creates a lake. Lakes are great. People go boating on them. They go swimming. They go fishing. I'm from Austin. There's lakes all over the place. People love them. But that wasn't part of the transaction of you buying the electricity. They also create negative results. For example, habitats for lots of animals and maybe even people's homes were lost when what used to be above water land is now underwater where the lake is. Downstream from the dam, there's less water, so a farmer down there now has less water to water his crops. Well, who pays for that? Those people just got screwed. They weren't part of that transaction of buying electricity. They were just innocent bystanders who just got ripped off. The classic externality in real life is pollution. So I go and I fill my car up with gas. The oil company and the gas station get paid. I get what I want, which is gas to get around town, but I'm polluting the air. Well, who pays for that? Well, if the government doesn't intervene, nobody pays for it. It's an externality, you see. Now, one thing we do in the case of gasoline, for example, is we put excise taxes on gas to help pay for things like the damage done by pollution. We also go around and we do things like tax or fine polluters for polluting. You think of Superfund, which doesn't really work all that well, but it's the idea is that we're going to make you pay for your externality if you're a polluting company. If you're talking about regulations, ask yourself, is this regulation designed to address an externality? And if the answer is yes, and somebody tells you, well, that's market interference, you got to get rid of it, you need to explain to these people, who do you expect to pay for that externality? If a company pollutes all the drinking supply, they got rich in polluting the drinking supply, but conservatives apparently believe they shouldn't have to pay for that. Responsibility, right? You got the money from this result, but they're arguing that you shouldn't have to pay any consequence for that result. That's crazy. And no economist, no real economist, believes that. They believe that if you create a problem, you should have to cover that cost, or society overall will suffer. So that's externalities. The final thing I want to talk about, and this is one thing Cenk does really well on the show, is perverse incentives. One of the rules of economics, one of the baseline assumptions is incentives matter. We do what we do to get something, to get paid, to get a bonus, to get affection. I like to read your comments and the reviews, so I do this. Thanks for those, by the way. Incentives matter. Now, this becomes a problem when what we want as a society is not the incentive we create in the market. Here's a great example: health insurance. Now, in a normal market, I produce a product you want. I sell it to you. You're satisfied with the product. I make money. You're satisfied. You buy more. You tell other people. I make more money. And so my incentive is to make the best possible product. But some markets don't work that way. Some markets, we make money by screwing people. And health insurance is a great example. See, my incentive in health insurance is to convince you to buy my product, to pay for it as long as you can, up until the point you get sick, and then to figure out a way not to cover you. Because that's how I can make the most money. Paying for your 12-year fight with cancer is going to cost me more money than figuring out a legal loophole to say, I've taken your money for 30 years for your coverage, but it is in my economic interest not to pay for your coverage. Hotels are a great example, particularly roadside hotels on the interstate. because they don't do a lot of repeat business, they don't have a great incentive to give you a wonderful experience. That's why little hotels on the highway often suck. Because it's the middle of the night, you need a place to stay. You probably don't have very good information, going back to the idea of perfect information in the first discussion. And so you go there, and they're much better off giving you crappy toilet paper, one towel, bad, dirty, old stained sheets, because the chance that you're going to be driving down that road again and be in the position to choose that hotel again is very low. Internet reviews, by the way, are kind of changing this dynamic, because now we have better information. So we're starting to learn what's a crappy hotel and what's not. In fact, if you didn't know this, businesses with perverse incentives hate internet reviews, because they used to make money by taking your money with your expectation you were going to get satisfaction for your money, providing you with a crappy product. But because they're in an industry where there's not a lot of repeat business, like a hotel in a small town on the interstate, they have no incentive to provide you with good service. Another example of perverse incentives is what happened with the banks and mortgages. They were not making, now the idea of a bank is if they make sound loans, they make wise decisions, and loan the right people money, they're going to make a lot of money. But what ended up happening is they figured out that they could make more money by making a lot of loans, charging exorbitant fees for the origination of the loan, and then dumping that mortgage somewhere else, like say Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. And then if that's your incentive, if the way you make money is make as many loans as possible, not make as good loans, then all of a sudden you have a perverse incentive to do liar loans, to give loans to people that don't know where they're going to pay their house back, because all you really care about is the origination fee and the other fees surrounding the creation of the loan. So when somebody wants to talk to you about whether or not a market should be regulated, ask yourself, what is the incentive of this market? How does the seller make money in this market? And then say, is that something we want done, people making a better meal at a restaurant? Or is that something that's destructive to society, originating a bunch of loans simply to get the fees? So anyway, these are the new rules as far as I'm concerned. When we talk about regulation, you don't say, yes, I want regulation, no, I don't want regulation. You've got to ask a series of questions. You have to ask, are we trying to deal with the problem of externalities? Are there results from these transactions that aren't being covered? If so, we need regulation. Are the people in the market incentivized to do what we want? If they're incentivized to do things we as a society don't want, like make bad loans, for example, or drop people from their coverage when they get sick, that's a dysfunctional market that needs regulation. Going back to our first discussion, we should ask ourselves, does this regulation create unnecessary and unwanted barriers to entry? And finally, we have to ask ourselves, is this regulation increasing or decreasing the amount of buyer and seller knowledge? Now, as far as I'm concerned, those are the four circumstances where you want to regulate a market. And here's the irony. You're regulating the market to create greater economic efficiency. You're regulating the market to distribute goods and services the best we can. And if you remember what I said way in the beginning of the first one of these, a market is a tool. And just like any other tool, we don't use it just to use it. We use it to get what we want. And what we want is the best goods distributed at the lowest price possible. And anything that gets in the way of that needs to be dealt with. And that's the case for regulation. Thanks for listening to this episode of TYT History, which was really TYT Economics. Let me know what you think. Tell me where I'm wrong. Do you have any better examples? I could certainly use them. I teach this stuff all the time. If you disagree with me, I'd love to hear your argument. Thanks for listening as always. You guys are great. The comments are wonderful. Y'all are incredibly smart, smarter than I am. I learned so much from reading your stuff. So keep checking these out, and I'll keep making them. Oh, I hope you learned something.